Hello, everybody. Brad Jeffers here with my friend Jesse Misko.
How's it going?
Good. We're coming to you today with concerns. We've had many people reach out to us, members and match directors, that are very concerned about the upcoming cuts in the Steel Challenge peak times. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say, Jesse?
Yeah, I would say so.
And one disclosure too, like Jesse's a 5-time world champion this year. I've won some senior world championships and different things in multiple guns. So I think we have a pretty good feeling for the different divisions, as specifically as related to low ready. So we're going to give you some of our thoughts, our concerns, and what we hope to accomplish, or the information we want the members to know about what's about to happen, so that the membership can have some input, even if it's just on public forums, about what's happening and what they would like to see happen.
Sounds good.
First off, why are we doing it, and what we're trying to get to here. So I think me and Jesse's concern when we have people reaching out is we are seriously concerned about the damage that these cuts could do to a sport that we both care very much about. Is that fair, Jesse?
Yeah, and I guess what we have to realize is, what is our community made up of? Steel Challenge is heavy in juniors and very heavy in seniors and beyond. We're not a sport like USPSA where it's heavily dominated by 18 to 54 middle-aged men. So we kind of have to take that into consideration when we are figuring out these peak times. And that kind of drives us to where we are now, which I guess the concern is that we're cutting peak times too much and they're too aggressive.
And I would say they're in the wrong places.
Yes.
As far as divisions are concerned. So a couple comments Jesse made there that I'll expand on a little bit. Now, I've done coaching and some Steel Challenge teaching for a couple years. Me and Jesse have worked together some. He's also done some individual stuff as well. So I feel like we have a pretty good connection to the shooting community. And I think it is very important to us that this is not about the Grandmasters only, or the battle to get to Grandmaster. When we're talking about the ramifications of the changes that are about to be put in place.
Yeah, so to kind of give some backstory on what we've learned on how these changes were implemented, is there is a Steel Challenge committee. They made a recommendation to the board of USPSA with these time changes, and it was put into place. And so there was really no community input. Very few people were even aware that changes were made up until the minutes were posted from USPSA. And that's when everybody figured it out.
Yeah, so a couple concerning things there. I think when the people involved in Steel Challenge reflect back, there was a survey about limited optics and who would shoot it and how often they would shoot it. And it felt like we were getting some feedback or some participation in the discussion. Now, limited optics is, there's a very small people that are passionate about limited optics in Steel Challenge. So it will affect a few people, but very few. And then we get this huge item about all these peak changes, that some are unprecedented as far as how severe they are, and no one was contacted. No one I know of was contacted or consulted. This wasn't vetted among membership. And quite honestly, they don't really make a lot of sense when it comes down to the common sense breakdowns in these different divisions. And me and Jesse will talk more about that. But I think that kind of sent some red flags up to people. And I'm not sure they were very forward looking when they were presented. The USPSA board has got a lot on their hands right now too. We need to back up a little bit and say, hey, their plate is pretty full. They're trying to put out some fires and try to get some things going the right way. So we don't know personally exactly how and what was presented there. We also know that the Steel Challenge committee is made up of 4 to 5 people that care about Steel Challenge and are good people. So we are not doing this to try to put any of them down or discredit them, but that doesn't mean that we don't have legitimate concerns and are not trying to, and we are trying to find solutions to these problems that will not hurt a sport we care about.
Yeah, sounds good. Do you want to drive into numbers?
Yeah, let's do that a little bit. So I think Steve Foster and Jeff Jones did a podcast with Zach Jones that talked a little bit about some of the cuts. So we will not get specifically into all of them just to try to limit the time a little bit. But most of us that shoot all these divisions would agree that a couple of divisions, I'm going to use the word softer, is softer GMs. So they're a little easier to make GMs in some divisions versus others. And I think there's some legitimate concerns about that. And maybe some of those should be evened out a little bit more. And that would be a great discussion to have and a good goal to work towards. We've not been given the goal nor the reason for these cuts. But the one cut I'm going to focus on here a little bit is what we're doing to rimfire pistol irons. This was a little over 8 seconds of cuts on a division that has our lowest percentage of grandmasters of all of the low ready positions, which is 6 guns. Jesse, you want to go over the formula they're using at this time?
So the current formula is for each stage, they take the top 95% of people who shot it. So if you shot a GM time, they would take that all together, average it out, and that was the peak time. And they would do that for all the stages, add them together, and that's your match peak time.
Yeah, so I'm going to focus a little bit on rimfire pistol irons. In talking to match directors, I've had multiple match directors be very concerned about this specific division for a couple reasons. One, it is a very popular entry-level position, often for juniors, but also for seniors or first-time shooters, because so many people have a Ruger Mark IV or Mark III in their safe, or a Browning Buckmark, or something they can bring out of the safe and come to the range and shoot Steel Challenge for their first time. So the cuts to this division are a little bit over 8 seconds. I believe it's 8.05 seconds, which I cannot find any information anywhere that says this is an extremely there's no precedent even close to this for a division that is very difficult right now. I think 95% of the people that shoot these divisions, the low readies, would say this is definitely the most difficult, and it is receiving the biggest cuts. We'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen, because we put this new formula in place. There should be a good reason for it, and the intention was for it to go on forward. What it does is, it changes obviously a combined of 8.05 seconds, but if we apply it to next year, assuming that no guns are shot faster, that this gun is just shot the exact same time, and we've done the math to go through and project all that, the peak will get cut another 4 seconds next year. So that's going to be 12 seconds in 2 years.
And guess what? People like Lance Jr. and Adam Reno have shot faster times at other matches, and I would not be surprised if they shoot much faster next year.
It could easily happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I believe right now we have 14 or 49 GMs of everyone that shoots GMs. The people that are presently at 95% above are 49. At the end of next year, that will be reduced to 16. Right? So we're cutting 67% of the GMs out of the toughest division. Okay? And what would end up happening is 4 of the 8 divisions, the peak time would actually be faster than the women's world record. So to me, that's a caution, like a very bright flashing yellow light or a red light saying, wait a second, what are we doing and why?
Yeah.
Why are we hurting all these people that are goal driven trying to get to their peak times?
And we aren't saying we need to use the amount of GMs. We aren't using that as we need 5% of people to be GM. We're using that percentage of GMs as a identifier telling us, hey, are these divisions too easy or too hard? Because PCCI is 13%. 13% of people who shoot PCCI are GMs, whereas less than 2.5% are RFPI GMs. Now, again, we're not trying to change that so that there's exactly 5% RFPI GMs, but if we cut it down to 16, that'll probably bring us to under 1% GMs, which pretty much shows that it would be too difficult to achieve GM for almost anybody.
So what happens with the formula that's been put into place is the really fast people at the top become more and more significant because the bottom keeps moving up. And as the bottom moves up, there's less and less people to equate. When I was going through this, and it takes a lot of time, is one of the reasons we haven't done it with all the divisions, because it literally takes a ton of time. But after next year, there would only be 5 scores that would even be averaged in for outer limits, right? There would be 5 scores averaged in for accelerator. And I think the highest of all was, let me count, 8 scores, right? And that was on Smoke and Hope or Showdown. There'd be 8 or 9 scores averaged in. So you're eliminating everyone except the elite. Now, the year after that, those numbers will be reduced even more. So this is just a 2-year. Like in 4 years, it'll be much more severe. And it affects the guns with the lowest amount of participants first. So you're going to see these dramatic cuts be more significant on the guns more people shoot, like RFPO, RFRO. They will vastly decrease as we go on. Those cuts will be more and more severe on those divisions in the future, even though they're getting cut substantially now. We'll talk a little bit. So I'm going to jump out of the PI division, right? Which in 2 years we're going to have 4 women's world records that aren't even GMs, which to me is like crazy. First off, we have great women shooters, like not good women shooters. We have extremely good. We have women that are at the very top of our sport and outstanding. So to me, that's really troubling when I see this number show up. But another thing I'm going to go to is when me and Jesse started getting into this, and we want to find solutions too. We don't want to just be critical. When we start looking at this, we look at some of these stages, and right now the system that's being used is all based off of stage time rather than match time or the total combined score of the 8 stages.
Yep.
Obviously, Jesse's a friend of mine, but he has put in literally hours and hours and hours and hours crunching numbers, trying to figure out, okay, where are these problems at and how do we fix them? And I think we have some good solutions. But the first thing we got to really focus on right now is not damaging our sport and trying to come up with a solution to get what's about to happen. I feel like we need to get it stopped. Like we need to put the brakes on, analyze this information, get people's input, and make sure we make a good decision rather than a hasty one.
Yeah, the solution that and when I say I've come up with, that's false because I've gotten input from at least 5 or 6 different people on how to do it differently. When I first created my own equation, there were a lot of flaws with it. Like there was a lot that I got wrong, and a lot of people helped me get through that, put in proper numbers in there and proper kind of ideas as to what needs to be done, especially with getting rid of using stage times for the peak times and going into match times. What we have is very robust, but of course it takes time, and there's still a lot of changes that would probably need to be done to the formula itself before it's perfect. And I say perfect, but it's never going to be perfect. Everyone's not going to be happy with it. That's just reality. But it would solve so many issues. But at this point, we need to just stop what we're doing right now. I would say we just freeze the times, don't even change them this year, and then work towards 2026 being when the peak times actually change, and they change in ways that are more sustainable.
So let me give you another little example about numbers. And there again, I wish I had more time to go through all these stages, but I'm going to just talk to you about 5 to go and what has happened with the stage of 5 to go. Okay. So last year, when the cuts were made, there was a 1/4 of a second cut on 5 to go for RFPO. Okay. RFPO was already the fastest by at least a 1/2 a second over RFRO, and even more than that in the other divisions that I'm going to talk about, which are the fastest ones, which is PCCO and rimfire rifle irons. Okay, so I just went back and took the top 20 times from 2022, 2023, and 2024 World Speed Shooting Championships, which is supposed to be what all these cuts are based on. Okay, so in 2022, the top 20 times in RFRO were 8.2 seconds was the average in RFRO. PCCO came in second with 8.72. RFRI was third with 9.03. And the fastest gun on our peak times came in fourth at 9.17. Now, I didn't even put in PCCI, which probably would possibly could come in even faster. So at best, RFPO was fourth fastest. Okay. Now, in 2023, the fastest gun again was RFRO at 8.06 seconds. There again, that's the average for the top 20 guns. The second fastest that year was rimfire rifle irons, which was 8.45. Third fastest was PCCO at 8.68. And fourth fastest again, or dead last of the guns I'm comparing, was 8.73. Now, 2 years of data at Worlds, the slowest gun, RFPO, which was already the fastest peak time, was the one that was decreased and made faster. Not the three that were faster than it, right? So immediately that's another red flag that says something's wrong with how we're calculating these. 2024, we'll look at it again to see, okay, maybe my numbers were wrong. RFRO was again the fastest. PCCO was the second fastest. Rimfire rifle irons was the third fastest. And again, RFPO was the fourth fastest. But yet it's the one that was decreased. So right there, it's like, okay, we need to look at what we're doing and figure out why the numbers are not aligning with what's actually being shot at Worlds, when we're being told that these strictly are reflecting the World Speed Shooting Challenge scores. That's not happening according to just the basic data, that we have.
Yeah, in an ideal world, every stage would be equally difficult to hit GM than any other stage. So outer limits would be just as easy or as hard, whichever way you put it, to GM as 5 to go.
Yes.
And so
correct.
that would be the ideal place to get to.
So another thing to look at if we bounce back to the cuts last year in a couple of divisions. So last year, rimfire pistol optics was cut. Okay? It was made faster by 1/4 of a second. Now, the formula they were using then was anything over 110% are considered outliers and were not being evaluated in. So if we look at rimfire pistol optics on 5 to go, last year there were 5 outliers. Okay? 5 people shot faster than 110%. Okay? Of all the stages, there were 10 outliers on Showdown. There were 6 on Roundabout, 7 on Accelerator. 7 on Speed Option, and so on and so forth. But the stage they chose to cut had the next to the least outliers. And in 2024, this year, it actually had the least of all outliers was the stage they cut. So when you have less outliers, it's not the fastest stage. Okay. And then we can go to what was cut on rimfire rifle optics. So when we look at the stages, rimfire rifle optics, there were 16 outliers on 5 to go, 12 on Showdown, 11 outliers on Smoke and Hope, 4 outliers on Outer Limits, 14 outliers on Accelerator, 8 outliers on Pendulum, 5 outliers on Speed Option, and 15 outliers on Roundabout. So of all of those, I'm going to tell you the least outliers was Outer Limits. So that's the one that the best shooters in the world had the most trouble being 110% over. And guess which one we cut, Jesse? Outer Limits.
Wow, really?
The one with the least number of outliers is what we seem to keep cutting. Now, the problem is the fact that the math is bad, right? We're applying a mathematical equation to peak times that are wrong, and those peak times is what our totals are getting based on. And that's easy to prove. I just don't want to take up an extra half hour of your time showing you how that works. But in an ideal world, we would have the same number of outliers or very similar in all the stages if our peak times were right. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, and we don't have that now. So we're cutting the wrong places. The equations aren't working for the membership. And our goal is we want people to come shoot Steel Challenge.
What would happen if these times are applied, and so mainly what will happen at the local matches?
Okay, here's a good example. I actually have a good friend. His name's Bill Hedrick, and some of you guys know Bill. He's a super good guy, and he's passionate about Steel Challenge. Like, he's trying to reach A class, and with one of his guns, and he's getting better and better, working hard at it. So, and I've told some of my friends his little personal story, but I won't share that here. So Bill's working towards A class. Now, I'm going to use rimfire pistol irons as an example here. If Bill at the end of the year was 1 second, or this could be anyone, but 1 second from making A class, in 2 years, he would be 17 seconds away. We would be adding 16 seconds to the difference between where he is now and if he was 1 second away and where he would be. So,
yeah, if you thought battling for 1 second was hard, once you see that you're 16 seconds away, now it's like, try taking my times at a 55 and taking away even a few seconds. And I think the response that we're getting from people, which is why we're sitting here talking to you folks, is people are frustrated. Like, they're like, I'm just going to give up. It's not worth it anymore. It's silly for me. I'm so discouraged that I've been working hard. I'm getting closer. And now these goalposts are moving so far and so fast. And I'm hearing also that they could move, if they use the same formula, they will move as severely the following year. That's just pure math. That is easy to prove. So this isn't a one-time thing. And even if it was a one-time thing, it's all in the wrong spots. It is not appropriate for how the divisions are actually shot. Would you agree with that? Yes.
And that's what's concerning. None of these peak times are going to affect Jesse or myself. So we're not here pleading our case. We're pleading for the members that are in B class trying to get A, in A class trying to get to M, the people that are working hard to get to GM and are getting close. And we don't want them to quit shooting Steel Challenge. Our sport is largely driven by people trying to get to the next goal.
And that's what really hooks people into the sport, yes, too.
We shoot the same 8 stages over and over and over. So there's no variety, right?
Yep.
But we see all these really cool Facebook posts about people with their match tracker apps out. I just got a personal best. I'm this much closer to the next stage. And I would hate to see all that disappear. And that's what I feel is likely to happen.
Yeah, or at least the road to rank up would be, instead of a 1-year goal, it would turn into a 3 or a 4-year goal, which, let's be honest, after 5 to 10 years, people usually stop shooting. Like, that's why you look at Worlds and you don't see some people's names who you know very well at the top anymore. You see people like myself, Jesse Grant, Adam Reno, and even we won't be here for more than probably 5 years, if that.
A recent conversation I had with Brian Conley said the turnover is 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Which, no, that's not everyone, but that is a huge percentage of the turnover in Steel Challenge. So we don't want to speed that up. We don't want to discourage people from trying to reach their goals. And we are driven by that group of people. Remember also, we are really high seniors and high juniors. So, that's who our clientele is. That's who we need to be trying to work to help. No one is saying GMs need to be a piece of cake. They need to have value. But it needs to be appropriate, and it needs to be the divisions need to be balanced correctly, rather than taking some of the hardest divisions, making severe cuts on them because a math equation spit that out.
Mm-hmm. Because GM shouldn't be difficult for myself to achieve, because I'm in peak physical form at 27 years old. I'm at this point, it's probably soon enough I'll go downhill. So the times I'm putting in at around 50, that's probably the fastest we'll see, unless more people my age come along. Mm-hmm. So we really need to forget about myself, Adam, and Lance, because we're by and large the outliers. We don't need to cater to us three. We need to make a sport that's fun for all ages.
Yeah, and that comes back to some of the match directors that are very concerned. So we shoot these same 8 stages over and over with our match tracker apps going, trying to pick up some time, and we know what our peaks are and we're working towards these goals. If we take that away, the match directors are like, why am I shooting Steel Challenge? Like, half my people would rather shoot Outlaw, but I shoot classifiers for the other half, knowing the half that don't really care about peaks will still show up. If you take away the half that care, it's just an Outlaw match, which really hurts SCSA, and then Steel Challenge basically starts to disappear pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the people that travel to the level 2 and above matches, they're by and large grandmasters or masters. So we take those away. We're taking, in 2 years, we'll take 67% of the GMs away from pistol irons. That will all happen on the other ones too. Who's going to go to those matches? I don't know. I know I have a blast teaching and coaching and watching and getting a phone call from, a friend in Colorado saying, "Hey, I made it. I'm ordering a new gun." And that's pretty cool stuff. And I don't want that to go away if we can help it. That's my concern. And certainly the outlaw steel is going to get a bigger footprint, not a smaller one with these changes.
Yeah.
I think another interesting thing too is, and this is important, is we want to offer solutions, right? It's easy to complain and moan and say, "I don't like this." I will say that we've come up with some really good ideas that I feel work, and they work across all divisions, and they make the cuts in the right places, and they are consistent with time. There's not this radical stuff that bounces in and out. And I'm excited to share that. I don't know that right now is the time to get deep into it because it is a long story, but Jesse, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you want to take a deep dive into what's been created, go on the Steel Challenge section of Brian Enos and look for the peak time calculation form. I'm not going to release it outside of that because I don't want people thinking that that is what is going to be implemented otherwise. It's very much in the draft form still, so I want to keep it as incognito as possible, but if you want to know what it is out there and you can find it.
And there again, that's not a finished product. It's not foolproof, but I think it's a good start because it's based on the 13 total times to be a GM, not the 8 stages of 13 times, which allow us to make cuts and changes that reflect how fast people are shooting it, rather than some of the statistics I've given you earlier that are completely contradictory to how they're actually being shot.
Yeah, what it really does is it takes the last 3 years, it uses, and this is all based off of math.
3 years of data versus 1.
Correct. So first off, we forget about stage peak times. We find out how, on average, how fast does somebody shoot 5 to go compared to the match time. So let's just say 5 to go is usually 10% of the match time for a specific category of guns, so like rimfire rifles. Then we take the average, and this is a very arbitrary average, kind of something that, and there's always going to be some arbitrary parts to this. But let's say we take top 20% of people who ever shot Worlds for the past 3 years, RFRO, we take top 20% of that, average those match times together, and then apply it to that 10% stage time. So let's just say 70 seconds. Smoke and Hope was 10% of a score. Smoke and Hope is now peak time of 7 seconds. And of course, that's just a complete guess. That's not actually what it's going to be. Yeah. I'm not looking at anything. That's just what came to mind, and to make it simple.
Yeah.
But that is the core of what this formula applies.
The cool thing is the changes become solid and consistent and only change as guns and times change, and it becomes very small changes because it's based over 3 years and more data. And where all the flaws really get serious is when we try to take a division that's got 24 guns in it, all of them are GMs, in 1 year, and then we end up with these huge changes because we just don't have enough data, and that becomes an issue.
Yeah, it seems like with the current formula that's being applied, all the more difficult guns are getting faster proportionately to the optic guns.
Yeah, we're even getting cuts in the centerfire divisions that aren't even being shot, and then very, very few people, if anyone, can even shoot GM times, and those are even being cut, which is not going to help those divisions either. But
I wouldn't be surprised if some iron guns, assuming we go down this path, will have faster match peak times than some of the optic guns.
Well, I think this is important. If we go back to the 5 to go, we listed the last 3 years of Worlds, and that RFRO is the fastest on 5 to go significantly with the last 3 years of data. Like nothing is even close to it, and is consistently first by about half a second or more. And with the new peak times, 5 to go, rimfire rifle optics will be the 4th fastest gun, not the first. So 3 years of data, and we are completely flipping what's happening as far as how the guns are being shot. Now, that's problematic.
Yeah, because there, and really where the flaw comes into is we just don't have enough data from the WSSC. When you look at RFRO, there's a big spread between Master, Grandmaster, A, B, and there's even some C's in there. But we look at some of the iron guns, especially PCCI, I don't even know if there was a C or a B class or even more than 1 or 2 A classes. It was all GMs and all Masters. And that's because who casually is going to spend $125 on a gun that they hardly ever shoot? They're going to shoot PCC optics because that's their gun. People like myself who can be competitive in that division will shoot it. But for everyone else, they're going to stick with optics.
Jesse, it looks like there were 2 A's, all the rest of them, maybe 3 M's, and the rest were GMs, right?
Yeah, looks like
so in PCCI. But the B-class shooter doesn't show up at Worlds or level 2 matches with their PCCI. It's something people bring with them to shoot because they're already there. They've made the long trip. They have the hotels. While they're there, they'd like to shoot multiple divisions. So trying to base these cuts off of a division like that is really tricky. And common sense says that a division that's restricted, that says you can't have an optic on it, should never be faster than a gun that isn't restricted. I mean, common sense comes into that equation. A production pistol should never be faster or consider a faster peak time than an open pistol. It's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense, but yet that's the road we're going down right now.
Yeah, and by using math, I actually did the calculations, and I took all the people who shot the exact same, the same people who shot both RFRO and RFRI times compared to themselves, on average, shoot at 5% slower irons than optics. And that's across the board on average.
So that gives us a great statistic that's based on actual shooter results, right? So we know that RFRI is roughly 5 to 6% slower than RFRO. And you did the same thing with PCCI, PCCO. Yep. We did the same thing with rimfire rifle irons and rimfire pistol irons, rimfire pistol optics, which gives, and all those percentages lay out perfectly. And it's like, when you look at it, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And you don't have to have as much data then when you know what the difference is, because there is a difference between shooting irons and shooting optics. That doesn't mean everyone in the world will always shoot one faster, but over any significant term, the unrestricted guns are and should be faster than the restricted guns.
Yeah, so I guess to wrap it up, these peak times will probably end up damaging our sport more so than helping it. And the goal of these, at least what I believe the goal of these peak times, or at least peak times in general, is to allow people a reason to shoot the same 8 stages over and over again. And so we don't want to see level 1 matches lose their participation, because that will climb its way up to Worlds. If there's less people shooting level 1 matches, there'll be less people shooting level 2s, and then level 3s, and then finally up into Worlds, which we don't want to go down that path. And so the solution, I think, currently is anybody listening to this, if you're in agreement with us, or even if you're in disagreement with us, voice your opinions to the board of directors at USPSA. And with this podcast, if you look in the text area, we'll put in all the emails of all the board members, the president. Voice your opinion. Like, have a say. These changes weren't made through a poll, nor were they discussed with the community. So this is kind of your time to tell them what you actually want, whether it's for or against what we're saying. And that's fine. If more people are against us, that's what the community wants, and that's what we're going to go with.
Absolutely, and that's critical. We just want to get something out there because of Jesse and I's podcast in the past. There's a significant following, and we've gotten to know a lot of people. We want you to have a voice. But if you do have concerns, you really need to reach out to people, because the changes will have effects, and you can be part of solutions if you're willing to take 2 minutes and send an email. And another thing, like Zach Jones is in charge of the Steel Challenge Committee. He is a wonderful person. He cares deeply about our sport, and he is going to be more than glad. He's not going to be upset with anyone for sending him an email or a note expressing, whatever your thoughts are. Zach's a very good person, and he cares genuinely about what all's happening. So certainly, I don't know Zach extremely well. Jesse knows him better than I do, but I know he's not going to be angry with someone for sending an opinion in, either in support or against what's going on. And, match directors, if you're listening, you have a large voice, and you have a better idea of how this might affect your matches than most. So certainly it is time to speak up. We've spent, oh geez, I don't know how many phone calls and hours, but it probably gets into days, not hours.
Yeah, I want it to be over already.
Yeah, and we're only doing it for you guys, right? We want the best possible game for the people that love to shoot steel.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to add to that.
Yeah.
I guess if this goes south, we'll just start playing pickleball.
Hey, there is. And there's one thing that we need to bring up, that Jesse Misko just presently arrived in Athens, Ohio. So we're sitting here in Athens, Ohio. And the 5-time world champion did concede defeat to the old fat blind guy last night in pickleball. So I'm 1-0 in the pickleball match, even though I don't have any world championships in Steel Challenge. He has defeated once. And we were talking today, I think we're going to go to Walmart and buy a paddle for our friend Steve Foster.
Oh yeah, he needs one.
He needs a pickleball paddle.
It has to be pink though.
Well, I think that a pink pickleball paddle will probably replace that tennis racket that he likes so much.
Yeah, and all his colorful guns.
Great. Hey, great talking to everyone. Glad you tuned in. Leave comments. Feel free to text me or Jesse or email us. We want what's best for you and the sport, and have a great rest of your day.
See you, everybody.